Don't look up. Ex-prisoner saved female police after catching something terrifying in the sky. Get down. Now. Marcus Thompson shouted, lunging forward to tackle Officer Sarah Chun to the ground behind her patrol car. The metallic were above their heads grew louder, and she instinctively reached for her weapon, aiming it directly at the 34-year-old black man pinning her down. What the hell do you think you're? Sarah's angry words were cut short by the deafening crash of her car's rear window exploding into 1,000 pieces. Glass rained down exactly where she had been standing 3 seconds earlier. Marcus had been walking past the downtown police station when he spotted the small surveillance drone hovering silently above the parking lot, its camera locked on Officer Chun as she approached her vehicle. What made his blood run cold wasn't the drone itself. It was the small cylindrical attachment beneath it that he recognized immediately from his 5 years in federal prison. "Ma'am, I know this looks bad, but that thing up there just dropped a flashbang grenade," Marcus said calmly, his hands raised even as debris continued falling around them. "And I'm guessing whoever's controlling it isn't done yet." Sarah Chun, a 28-year-old patrol officer with only 2 years on the force, had never encountered anything like this. Her training screamed at her to arrest the ex-convict who had just assaulted a police officer, but the smoking crater where she had been standing moments before told a different story. Marcus slowly pointed upward without making any sudden movements. "There's 2 more drones circling the building, and unless I'm wrong about what I learned in Leavenworth, you've got about 30 seconds before they coordinate another attack." What Officer Chin didn't know was that Marcus Thompson wasn't just any ex-prisoner. He was a former military intelligence specialist who had been wrongfully convicted of hacking government systems while trying to expose corruption in defense contracts. His 5-year sentence had ended 6 months ago, but the real criminals he had tried to expose were still walking free, and apparently still very interested in keeping him quiet. "Radio for backup," Marcus urged, his voice steady despite the chaos. "But tell them to approach from the east side. The drones are programmed to target anyone in uniform coming from the main street." Sarah hesitated, her finger hovering over her radio. Everything about the situation defied her training, yet something in the man's eyes told her he was telling the truth. The same eyes that had spent years studying surveillance patterns and security weaknesses behind bars were now scanning the sky with the precision of someone who understood exactly what they were facing. "How could you possibly know that?" she demanded, weapon still drawn but no longer pointing directly at him. Marcus met her gaze with the calm intensity of someone who had been preparing for this moment since the day he walked out of prison. "Because I designed the software they're using." The second explosion, 20 feet closer than the first, sent them both scrambling for better cover. As sirens wailed in the distance and more officers arrived on scene, Marcus realized that his carefully planned life of quiet anonymity was about to become very public, very quickly. What these dirty cops and corrupt officials didn't realize was that an ex-prisoner with nothing left to lose and everything to prove could be far more dangerous than any drone in the sky. 3 squad cars surrounded them within minutes, officers emerging with weapons drawn, all pointed at Marcus despite Sarah's shouted explanations about the aerial attack. The irony wasn't lost on him. Once again, he was the suspect instead of the solution. But this time, Marcus had something he didn't have during his trial 5 years ago: proof, preparation, and a digital trail that would expose everyone involved in the conspiracy that had destroyed his life. The question was whether Officer Chun would trust an ex-convict long enough to help him reveal the truth, or if she'd let prejudice blind her to the real enemies circling overhead. As Marcus watched the officers' faces, seeing the same mixture of suspicion and disgust he had encountered every day since his release, he knew that his biggest challenge wouldn't be the drones or the corrupt officials controlling them. It would be convincing people who had already decided he was guilty that sometimes the most unlikely heroes emerge from the darkest places. As the chaos unfolded around them, Marcus's calm expertise with the drone technology hinted at abilities that went far beyond typical criminal knowledge, leaving everyone wondering who exactly this ex-prisoner was, and why he seemed to know so much about sophisticated surveillance equipment that most people had never encountered. If you're enjoying this story of justice, survival, and unexpected alliances, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because what happens next will challenge everything you think you know about guilt, innocence, and the price of fighting corruption in America. "Marcus Thompson, you're under arrest for assaulting a police officer," announced Detective Lieutenant James Whitmore as he stepped out of his unmarked sedan, his perfectly pressed uniform and smug expression making it clear he had been waiting for this moment. Sarah Chun stood up quickly, glass still in her hair from the drone attack. "Sir, you don't understand. This man just saved my life. Those drones were..." Officer Chun, Whitmore interrupted with the cold authority of someone who had spent 15 years climbing the police hierarchy. What I understand is that an ex-convict with a history of hacking government systems just attacked one of my officers in broad daylight. The drones you're talking about? I don't see any evidence of drones. Marcus watched as 3 other squad cars arrived, their occupants emerging with the synchronized precision of a well-rehearsed play. What Sarah didn't know was that Detective Whitmore had been one of the key witnesses in Marcus's original trial, the same trial where crucial evidence had mysteriously disappeared overnight, leaving Marcus unable to prove his innocence. Funny thing about surveillance footage, Whitmore continued, pulling out his phone to show Sarah a video that clearly showed Marcus tackling her, but conveniently cut off just before the first explosion. Technology can be so unreliable sometimes. Good thing we have witnesses who saw exactly what happened. The bitterness in Marcus's chest burned deeper as he recognized the familiar setup. 5 years ago, it had been missing hard drives and deleted emails. Today, it was edited security footage and convenient blind spots in the city's drone detection system. The same corrupt network that had destroyed his military career was now trying to finish what they started. Sarah's confusion was written across her face as she looked between Marcus and her superior. "Lieutenant, I'm telling you, there were armed drones. They dropped explosives." This man identified the threat and... "Chun," Whitmore's voice turned sharp, "are you questioning my assessment of the situation? Because if you are, maybe you need to reconsider whether you're fit to wear that badge." Marcus had heard that tone before, the same threatening undertone that defense contractor Robert Hayes had used when Marcus first discovered the fraudulent invoices. The same voice that promised career destruction to anyone who dared question the system. What they hadn't learned in 5 years was that a man who had lost everything once had nothing left to lose. "You know what's interesting, Detective?" Marcus said calmly, allowing the handcuffs to be placed on his wrists. "I spent 5 years in federal prison learning a lot about surveillance technology. Did you know that private security drones automatically upload footage to cloud servers before self-destructing? Amazing what they teach you in computer programming classes behind bars." The momentary flicker of concern that crossed Whitmore's face was quickly masked by professional arrogance. More conspiracy theories from a convicted felon. "Officer Martinez, read him his rights." But Sarah had caught that brief moment of hesitation too. Something in her gut told her that this situation was far more complicated than her lieutenant was making it seem. The debris from the explosions was real. The smell of smoke was real. And the calm intelligence in Marcus's eyes suggested someone who was playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers. "Sir," Sarah tried one more time, "shouldn't we at least investigate the drone claims? There might be physical evidence." "The only evidence here is an ex-convict who assaulted a police officer," Whitmore snapped. "Case closed." As Marcus was loaded into the police car, he caught Sarah's eye through the window. "Officer Chun, check the building's northwestern security camera. The one that's been malfunctioning for the past 3 months. Ask yourself why they haven't fixed it yet." The police cars pulled away, leaving Sarah alone in the parking lot with broken glass and scorch marks that her lieutenant seemed determined to ignore. What she didn't know was that Marcus had spent 6 months since his release carefully mapping every camera, every blind spot, and every corrupt official in the city's power structure. Back at the precinct, Marcus was processed with the same systematic humiliation he remembered from his first arrest. Fingerprints, photos, and the familiar ritual of being reduced from a human being to a case number. But this time, he wasn't the naive military intelligence officer who trusted the system to protect the innocent. Whitmore entered the holding cell area with the swagger of a man who thought he held all the cards. "You know, Thompson, I thought 5 years in Leavenworth might have taught you to keep your mouth shut. Guess some people never learn." "Oh, I learned plenty," Marcus replied, not bothering to look up from where he sat calmly on the narrow bench. "I learned that corrupt cops like you always make the same mistake. You assume that because you destroyed my life once, you can do it again." The detective's face hardened. "You're going back to prison, and this time there won't be any early release for good behavior. I'll make sure of that." "See, that's your first mistake," Marcus continued with the patient tone of a teacher explaining a simple concept. "You think I've been hiding for 6 months because I'm afraid of you. What I've actually been doing is documenting every move you and your friends have made since I got out." Whitmore stepped closer to the bars, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You're bluffing. You're a nobody. An ex-con with no money, no connections, no credibility. Marcus finally looked up, and for the first time, Whitmore saw something in those eyes that made him take an involuntary step back. It wasn't fear or desperation, it was the quiet confidence of a man who had been underestimated one too many times. You know what's funny about being invisible, detective? People say things around you they'd never say in front of someone they considered important. And technology has gotten so much more advanced since I went to prison. Smartphones, cloud storage, encrypted backups, all the things they don't teach in Old School Corruption 101. The color began to drain from Whitmore's face as he realized that the broken man they had railroaded 5 years ago was no longer broken, and definitely no longer the same naive idealist who had trusted the system to protect him. Each act of arrogance and cruelty from the past 6 months had been carefully catalogued by someone who understood exactly how to use their own weapons against them. 3 hours after Marcus's arrest, Officer Sarah Chun sat in her patrol car outside the precinct, staring at her phone screen. The malfunctioning Northwestern security camera that Marcus had mentioned was indeed offline, and had been for exactly 97 days. What made her stomach turn was discovering that the maintenance request had been filed and approved, but mysteriously cancelled 3 times by Detective Whitmore's direct orders. Inside the station, Marcus was using his one phone call in a way that would have surprised everyone listening. Instead of calling a lawyer, he dialed a number he had memorized during his time in Leavenworth. Elena Martinez, Channel 7 Investigative Unit, came the crisp professional voice. Ms. Martinez, this is Marcus Thompson. 5 years ago, you tried to interview me about the Hayes defense contract scandal, but I was too scared to talk. Well, I'm not scared anymore. Elena had built her career on exposing corruption, and she remembered Marcus's case perfectly, the military intelligence officer who claimed he'd been framed for trying to expose a multi-million-dollar fraud scheme. She had always suspected there was more to the story. Where are you now? Elena asked, her investigative instincts immediately engaged. In jail, charged with assaulting a police officer. But here's what's interesting. The same Detective Whitmore who testified against me 5 years ago just arrested me 30 minutes after I saved that officer's life from a drone attack that's not appearing on any official reports. While Marcus was making his call, Sarah was conducting her own investigation. She pulled up Detective Whitmore's case files from the past year and found a disturbing pattern: 7 different incidents involving surveillance equipment mysteriously malfunctioning during critical moments, all cases where Whitmore had been the lead investigator. Back in his cell, Marcus was finally putting his plan into motion. For 6 months, he had been working as a freelance IT consultant under an assumed identity, specifically targeting contracts with the city's security infrastructure. What his captors didn't know was that he had legitimately installed software updates in over 40% of the city's surveillance network, updates that included his own hidden backdoor access. You know what the beautiful thing about being invisible is, detective? Marcus said when Whitmore returned to taunt him. Nobody notices when you're fixing their computers. Whitmore's confident smirk faltered slightly. What are you talking about? Those software patches the city installed last month to fix the security vulnerabilities in the camera system? I wrote those patches. Every single one of them includes a timestamp feature that stores deleted footage for exactly 90 days before permanent erasure. The color drained from Whitmore's face as the implications hit him. Marcus continued with the calm precision of someone who had spent months planning this moment. Including the footage from today's drone attack. Including the footage from the 7 other cases where evidence mysteriously disappeared. Including the recordings of certain private conversations in certain people's offices where they discussed covering up certain drone tests using military-grade equipment. Elena Martinez arrived at the precinct within 45 minutes, accompanied by her camera crew and a team of lawyers from the Electronic Frontier Foundation who specialized in wrongful conviction cases. She had made some calls during the drive, and what she learned made her realize this story was bigger than she had imagined. I want to interview Marcus Thompson, she announced to the desk sergeant. And I want to see Detective Whitmore. Meanwhile, Sarah had discovered something that made her hands shake as she scrolled through her phone. The drone attack wasn't random. It was a field test of military equipment being illegally sold to private security contractors. The same equipment that Marcus had tried to expose 5 years ago, manufactured by Hayes Defense Systems, the company whose fraud scheme had sent an innocent man to prison. When Whitmore saw Elena Martinez walking into his precinct with news cameras, he knew that his carefully constructed cover-up was beginning to crumble. What he didn't realize was that Marcus had spent his prison years studying not just computer systems, but legal procedures, media manipulation, and the psychological profiles of corrupt officials. "Detective Whitmore," Elena called out, "I have some questions about the Marcus Thompson case from 5 years ago. Specifically about evidence that was deleted from the Hayes defense investigation." The detective's face went pale as he realized that the broken man he thought he had destroyed was actually 3 steps ahead of him. Marcus wasn't just seeking revenge. He was systematically dismantling the entire network of corruption that had destroyed his life. From his cell, Marcus could hear the chaos beginning in the main area of the precinct. Elena's questions were getting louder, more officers were gathering, and he could see through the small window that additional news vans were arriving outside. But the most important development was Officer Sarah Chun walking purposefully toward the holding cells with a look of determination that told Marcus's gamble on her integrity had paid off. She was carrying a laptop and wearing the expression of someone who had just discovered that everything she thought she knew about her department was a lie. The invisible ex-prisoner who everyone had underestimated was about to become very visible indeed, and he had spent 6 months ensuring that when the spotlight finally found him, he would be ready to blind everyone who had tried to keep him in the dark. "Detective Whitmore, we need to talk," Sarah Chen announced as she entered the interrogation area, her laptop open and displaying footage that made the blood drain from his face. The screen showed crystal-clear video of 3 military drones dropping explosive devices on the police station parking lot, with timestamps proving everything Marcus had claimed. "Where did you get that?" Whitmore demanded, his usual arrogance cracking like thin ice. "From the same backup servers that store 90 days of deleted footage from every camera in the city," Sarah replied coldly. "Including the ones in your office where you've been having some very interesting conversations with Robert Hayes from Hayes Defense Systems." Outside in the main area, Elena Martinez was broadcasting live, her camera crew capturing Detective Whitmore's increasingly panicked expression through the interrogation room window. "This is Elena Martinez reporting from downtown police station, where we're witnessing what may be the most significant corruption scandal in this city's history." Marcus sat calmly in his cell, watching the chaos unfold exactly as he had planned. For 6 months, he had been systematically documenting every conversation, every illegal transaction, every cover-up involving the network that had destroyed his life. But his masterpiece wasn't just the video evidence, it was the timing. "You see, Detective," Marcus called out from his cell, "while you thought I was hiding like a broken man, I was actually attending every city council meeting, every police commission hearing, every public forum where Hayes Defense Systems was discussed. Amazing how much people talk when they don't think an ex-convict could possibly matter." Whitmore spun around, his face twisted with rage and desperation. "Nobody's going to believe a convicted felon over a decorated police detective." "You're absolutely right," Marcus agreed with a sardonic smile. "That's why I made sure all the evidence came from your own words." Sarah clicked play on another video file, and suddenly the interrogation room filled with Whitmore's recorded voice from a conversation 3 weeks earlier. "The Thompson problem needs to be handled permanently this time. Hayes is getting nervous about the Senate investigation, and we can't afford to have that military intelligence background making people ask questions." The color completely drained from Whitmore's face as his own voice continued, "Set up a field test of the new drone capabilities. Make it look like he attacked a cop, then we justify whatever happens next as self-defense." Elena's broadcast was reaching peak viewership as more evidence flooded the screens. Bank records showing payments from Hayes Defense to shell companies controlled by Whitmore. Text messages coordinating the timing of today's drone attack. Email chains discussing how to frame Marcus for assault while field testing military equipment on American soil. The most damning evidence, Elena reported to her live audience, comes from Detective Whitmore's own security system, which Marcus Thompson legally serviced as part of his IT consulting work. Every conversation, every planning session for what appears to be an attempted murder using military drones, recorded by the very man they were trying to eliminate. Back in the cell, Marcus finally stood up, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who had spent 5 years studying every legal precedent, every appeal process, every method of exposing institutional corruption. "Detective, do you remember what you said to me 5 years ago during that first interrogation? You said, 'The system protects good cops from troublemakers like you.'" Whitmore's hands were shaking now as more squad cars arrived outside, not to support him, but to arrest him. Federal agents were already seizing his computers, his phone records, his financial documents. "Well, you were half right," Marcus continued. "The system does protect good cops. Officer Chun proved that today when she chose truth over loyalty to a corrupt superior. But you were wrong about one thing: I was never the troublemaker. You were. The final blow came when Sarah played the recording from that morning, captured by Marcus's hidden app on his phone, which had been automatically uploading to cloud servers throughout the entire arrest process. Whitmore's voice was crystal clear. You know, Thompson, I thought 5 years in Leavenworth might have taught you to keep your mouth shut. Guess some people never learn. Followed by Marcus's response, oh, I learned plenty. I learned that corrupt cops like you always make the same mistake. Elena's live broadcast caught the moment when federal agents entered the precinct to arrest Detective Whitmore. The man who had spent 15 years building a career on corruption and cover-ups was led away in handcuffs while news cameras captured every moment of his humiliation. The irony, Elena reported as Whitmore was pushed into a federal vehicle, is that Marcus Thompson's wrongful conviction actually gave him the skills, knowledge, and motivation necessary to expose a corruption network that had been operating for over a decade. As Marcus was finally released from his cell, he walked past the broken detective with the same calm dignity he had maintained throughout his 5-year imprisonment. No gloating, no threats, just the quiet satisfaction of a man who had used intelligence and patience instead of anger and revenge. Mr. Thompson, Elena called out as he emerged from the precinct, how does it feel to finally have your name cleared? Marcus paused, looking back at the building where his nightmare had begun and ended. Justice isn't about destroying your enemies, he said simply. It's about making sure they can't destroy anyone else. The revelation that would shock viewers most was still coming. The drone attack hadn't been random at all, but a calculated field test designed to eliminate the one person who could expose military contractors illegally selling weapons to domestic law enforcement, turning American streets into testing grounds for warfare technology that was supposed to be used only overseas. 6 months after Detective Whitmore's arrest, Marcus Thompson stood in the federal courthouse steps, adjusting his new suit as reporters surrounded him. The wrongful conviction lawsuit had just been settled for $2.3 million, but more importantly, his name had been completely cleared from all charges, both old and new. Mr. Thompson, Elena Martinez called out, now covering his story as a prime example of justice delayed but not denied, what's next for you after this legal victory? Marcus looked back at the courthouse where his nightmare had finally ended. The federal investigation triggered by his evidence had exposed a network of corruption spanning 3 states, involving over 40 law enforcement officials and defense contractors. Hayes Defense Systems had been shut down permanently, their illegal drone program terminated, and their executives facing decades in prison. Next month, I start my new position as Chief Technology Officer for the FBI's Cybercrime Division, Marcus announced, his voice carrying the quiet confidence of a man who had turned his greatest weakness into his greatest strength. Apparently, the government values people who understand both sides of the system, how to exploit it and how to protect it. Officer Sarah Chun, now Detective Chun after her promotion for integrity in the Whitmore investigation, stood beside him as his strongest supporter and closest friend. Their partnership had evolved from that chaotic morning into something deeper, a shared commitment to ensuring that justice systems actually served justice. The irony isn't lost on me, Marcus continued, that the same surveillance skills they sent me to prison for learning are now being used to catch corrupt officials and expose government waste. Sometimes the best way to fix a broken system is to understand it from the inside. Meanwhile, in federal prison, former Detective James Whitmore was serving a 25-year sentence for conspiracy, attempted murder, and racketeering. The man who had once controlled evidence and manipulated testimony now spent his days in a cell, forgotten by the system he had tried to corrupt. His pension had been revoked, his assets seized, and his reputation destroyed by the same media coverage he had once used to frame innocent people. The Hayes defense executives shared similar fates, their multi-million-dollar homes foreclosed, their country club memberships canceled, their children transferring schools to escape the family shame. The corrupt network that had seemed invincible had crumbled because they underestimated a man they considered powerless. Marcus's transformation from invisible ex-convict to federal cybersecurity expert hadn't happened overnight. The city had offered him a substantial consulting contract to upgrade their entire surveillance infrastructure, legitimately this time. Tech companies competed to hire the man who had single-handedly exposed the largest government corruption scandal in decades. But the most satisfying change was personal. Marcus had purchased a modest house in the same neighborhood where he'd grown up, and established a foundation providing legal aid and technology training for wrongfully convicted individuals. Every month, he received letters from prisoners who had heard his story and found hope that their own cases might be overturned. You know what I learned during those 5 years in prison? Marcus asked the gathered crowd of reporters and supporters. I learned that being invisible isn't always a disadvantage. Sometimes it's exactly what you need to see clearly, to plan carefully, and to strike precisely when the moment is right. Detective Chen nodded, remembering that morning when Marcus had saved her life by seeing dangers that others missed. The most dangerous person in any corrupt system, she added, is someone with nothing left to lose and everything to prove. Marcus proved that intelligence, patience, and integrity will always defeat arrogance, corruption, and prejudice. The press conference concluded with Marcus announcing his engagement to Dr. Lisa Patterson, the civil rights attorney who had represented him throughout his legal battles. She had seen past the ex-convict label to recognize the brilliant mind and unbreakable spirit beneath it, proving that sometimes love finds you exactly when you're ready to believe in yourself again. As the crowd dispersed, Marcus reflected on the journey from that morning when he tackled a police officer to save her life. He had been branded a criminal, dismissed as worthless, and written off by society. But he had also been underestimated by exactly the right people at exactly the right time. The best revenge, Marcus told Elena in his final interview, isn't destroying your enemies. It's succeeding so completely that you make their hatred irrelevant. Detective Whitmore spent 5 years trying to break me, but he actually gave me the tools to build something better than anything I could have imagined. His story had become a case study in criminal justice reform programs across the country, proving that the system's greatest failures could become its most powerful catalysts for change. The ex-prisoner who had once been society's throwaway had become its guardian, protecting others from the same injustices he had endured. Standing outside the courthouse in the afternoon sun, Marcus Thompson looked up at the sky, no longer scanning for threatening drones, but simply appreciating the freedom to walk wherever he chose. He had learned that true justice doesn't come from courtrooms or badges, but from ordinary people who refuse to let corruption win, no matter how long it takes or how impossible it seems. If this story of resilience, intelligence, and ultimate triumph over corruption inspired you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more incredible true stories that prove heroes can emerge from the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the greatest victories come to those who are patient enough to plan them perfectly.